Welcome into the Husker247 Postgame podcast. Nebraska loses to Ohio State 21-17 on Saturday, and at the Horseshoe to witness the game in all of its glory, Brian Christopherson from Husker247. Brian, before we get into Matt Rule's comments, before we get into some big picture stuff, what level of surprise were you by what we saw from Nebraska today? You were in Bloomington a week ago. You watched everything play out in a 56-7 loss that didn't even feel as close as the 49 points. And then you saw Nebraska go toe-to-toe with one of the giants in college football, have a lead in the fourth quarter, and give themselves at least an opportunity to go down and potentially win the game with one final drive. Didn't work out, but Nebraska loses 21-17. What's your level of surprise that we're having this conversation after the game?
Yeah, I told Bruns this is one of those tricky games for me because I grew up around this program, and Rule spoke about this in the post game. It's not a place where you want to talk about moral victories, and there's always that line that said that there is no such thing. And yet sometimes my brain tosses that around a little bit because you think about what we saw a week ago and what horse crap that was. I mean, it was just terrible representation of Nebraska football, and the glum feelings that I think people had about the program. I honestly thought Ohio State would cover the 25-point spread, and I thought it was going to be a blowout. I was not looking forward actually to coming to this on this trip. I thought it was going to be one of those games that we've seen in the past where Nebraska is just completely outmatched. And I just didn't know where this defense was at, like that we thought so highly of all offseason, and that they could go deliver a performance like they did today. So all that babbling to say, I am impressed with the effort, and that it was like a game that went down to the wire and that Nebraska was ahead in the fourth quarter. So I'm going to have trouble being like really critical because it's a game I think I picked 48-14 or something, sure. Ohio State. So in that sense, Nebraska did well. What I wrote, and I think this is the big deal, Schaefer, and then I'll stop talking, is I do think this can be a useful day for Husker football. But it's like where you got to push the chips in now, and you have to win the hand next week. And Rule said as much in the post game. You can't throw away whatever you think you gained with your performance today and the way your defense played and all that by losing to UCLA. You have to get that win next week, get to the bye with 6 wins, bowl eligibility, all that. And then you can maybe look back at this and say, man, that was positive what they did in Columbus, and now they're building on it. But they got to go prove that now.
Yeah, I saw that quote from Rule after the game, and I think it's astute. I mean, for as good as you might want to feel, given that Nebraska was able to hang with Ohio State for 4 quarters, none of it really matters if you don't go win games in November. And I'm saying games plural. I mean, even if you go get UCLA, then it's time to go play USC, and then it's time to play Wisconsin. And then you've got an Iowa team that's letting Northwestern hang around today, or at least early. And so, the opportunities are out there. And I think part of why last week felt as bad as it did is because, Matt Rule didn't see it coming. I didn't see it coming. You didn't see it coming. That wasn't Nebraska's version that they want to play by any means. And today was a little bit more representative of that. Let's dive into some individual stuff. We'll start on the defensive side of the ball. Brian, I was incredibly critical of Nebraska's defensive line after that game against Indiana. I had gone into that game thinking they would show up. They would be able to give the Huskers something to work off of. That didn't happen in Indiana. It absolutely happened at Ohio State in the Horseshoe today. I thought we saw maybe the best game from MJ Sherman, maybe the best game from Jimari Butler that we've seen in their careers. I mean, both of those guys made plays, Brian, where they ran down Will Howard in different situations. MJ Sherman's was for a sack. And I believe, Jimari Butler got the tackle that at least forced that critical 4th down conversion in the fourth quarter. They gave Nebraska a chance to get off the field. He stopped him short of the 1st down. And he worked across the field to go and do that. He got the big sack early in the game. I don't know if you could see it up in the press box. He got absolutely tackled by the neck in the first quarter that went completely uncalled. I thought Jimari Butler and MJ Sherman, and not to leave out Ty Robinson or Nash Hutmaker or any of those guys, I thought the front seven, or whatever we want to call that number, played fantastic on Saturday.
Yeah, I think Jimari had that play right before, was it the 4th and 1 where Ohio State converted it on the winning touchdown? Was that Butler, I think, who tracked
That was
him?
Butler, who he was on the inside closest to the far sideline, had to work around two people and ran down Will Howard to at least give Nebraska a chance on that 4th down. Honestly, it'll get lost because Nebraska didn't win this game, but I would tell you, if they had stopped them on that 4th down, that is like the Amir Abdullah 4th and 12 pickup before the Hail Mary, like just all individual grit and effort. So much respect for what Jimari Butler did today.
Yeah, he looked like he was maybe healthy again. I think he's been playing injured, and you're absolutely right. That would have been the play of the game, play of the season if Nebraska wins the game, probably. I thought the defense was mostly outstanding. The thing they're going to be annoyed with is they had basically 3 plays where they had sort of bust, and they killed Nebraska. The one was the first play to start the game-winning drive. I think there was a miscommunication there, went for about 25, 30 yards.
30 yards, yeah.
And then the first 2 Buckeye touchdowns, that was 100 yards of their 285.
So they have 130 yards on 212 yards passing.
Yeah.
130 of it on 3 plays.
Nebraska holds Ohio State to 64 rushing yards and at 2.1 yards per rush. The defense played a great football game against that caliber of team. And you have to sometimes tip your cap. A guy like Jeremiah Smith or somebody is going to run by you maybe once on a Saturday. So that happens. But it's too bad they couldn't get that 4th and 1 stop, because it would have been the punctuation not only on maybe a victory, but they held Ohio State to 1 of 10, I think, on 3rd downs.
Yep.
Yeah, so they played great football. They played like the unit that maybe we thought they were, like in August, and then we've had our wires crossed a little bit from last week, and we're confused, like, okay, who are they really? And today they were that type of defense. They looked like a group of veterans that expected to dominate and did. I thought Ty and Nash got a lot done, and frankly, Ohio State couldn't block them up front. So a very good performance by that group, and a nice bounce back from what was probably the worst game I think a lot of them would say of their careers just a week ago.
Yeah, they also, outside of, I think, a couple times where some safeties or defensive backs over pursued on cutbacks, for the most part, they bottled up whoever had the ball. I mean, Jeremiah Smith had his 2 big plays, but really Ohio State only got what was right in front of them. I mean, there wasn't a lot of missed tackles. There was the one really nice cutback, I think, from Henderson. I don't remember if it was Henderson or Judkins, where Hartzog came flying in and just completely didn't hit the run fit. But other than that, I mean, they did a really nice job keeping everything in front of them. If they can build on this and carry that into November against less talented teams, they're going to continue to give their offense a chance to win games. And they did. They did what we said before the season. If Nebraska can score 24 points or more, they're going to win most of their games. Mm-hmm. And obviously that wouldn't have worked against Indiana, but it would have worked again today. And I think the defense did a nice job answering some questions. Let's jump over. Before we get to offense, because we're going to spend, I think, more time on that, I just want to give you however much time that you would like to talk about the just kind of stunning ease in which John Hohl knocked down 3 field goals of decent distance. And Brian, those kicks were good as soon as they left his foot. Like, there was no body English when you're sitting on the couch trying to will that thing to get around to get inside the upright. Those were just, I mean, dead solid, perfect down the center. Yeah,
think about how mentally strong he had to be, because you're basically a guy who nobody really knew about before the season began. And then suddenly you're in all these conversations, you're struggling. Your family lives in the state. and all that. This was a great individual story to see him respond the way he did. They've always said he has the big leg. Today he showed a big mentality just to hit those kicks. The 54-yarder, you're right. Like he crushed it. Like you knew it was a good, and it was a kick don't lie, ball don't lie situation after the horrible spot. And I hate to get into the officiating too much after games like this, but something's got to be done about. Let's at least spot the football correctly. Like we couldn't get
Probably
that
about
right.
4 or 5 horrible spots, in addition
Yeah.
to a lot of other things that didn't go well today.
Yeah. So that was good that John Hohl responded there. And I think it lifted the spirits of his team, too. It's a nice thing when you're like, okay, you got those 3 points going into the locker room. They really ran off the field with a purpose. It's like, it's a one-score game now. We got a kicker. We don't have to go for it on 4th and 6 on the 25. There was definitely like a very good feeling attached to it that I think everybody kind of fed off of. And so there's no question that was one of the better like individual stories I think I've seen in a while of somebody having a nice redemption moment. And now, he's probably going to have some big kicks here in November, and he has that confidence at his back now.
Yeah, just to put it in perspective, what John Hohl did today, he had 3 made field goals in his senior year at Lincoln Southwest. He made 3 kicks in the horseshoe today,
and one as a school record on the road. Yeah,
right?
With a 147-foot flagpole like right behind the thing. It's a little different than kicking at Seacrest.
Yeah, a little different, little different. Okay, offensive side of the ball. Before we talk too much about whatever was going on with some of the play calling, let's just dive into a little bit of the running game. It was very feast or famine for Nebraska. That was one of the things that stood out for me when I went back and kind of looked at the numbers. You had 4 or 5 carries from Nebraska running backs that went for 12 yards or more, and a whole host of carries that went for 3 yards or less. And so they were either going to hit big on a few of them, or they were barely going to get across the line of scrimmage. So it was kind of notable in that regard. I actually thought in some ways Dylan Raiola's willingness to run the football today
It's huge.
Lifted Nebraska's offense in a way that I don't know I was prepared for. It didn't necessarily make them a machine, but it made Ohio State have to respect his legs, which makes them defend you a little bit differently. And he ripped off a 35-yard run in the second quarter. He was running, Brian, at one point like he wasn't sure why there was no one near tackling him. He was kind of like looking around, like, I'm not sure. At some point, I'm going to run out of gas here. What's going on? And there's just miles of open space, or yards, I should say, of open space. So that was great to see, because last week he had that opportunity against Indiana. He wouldn't step up and do it. He's had that opportunity at other times this year, and he seemed tentative to run. Today against Ohio State, right off the bat, he had several scrambles, one that picked up a first down, another, spot-wise, it should have been closer than where they put it. But I thought that was important for Dylan Raiola, the quarterback. It wasn't pretty, everything that came after, but I do think that's an important mentality. And I think it's important that you show opposing defenses this guy can move a little bit. Like he's not a nothing in that aspect. What do you think of the run game overall?
It was okay. I mean, I thought in the third quarter, they really found some things formationally that I feel like Ohio State was having to adjust to. And probably the thing that will be tough when they watch it back is they're going to feel like they didn't get the payout on those drives, like that they could have had, because that first drive of the third quarter, the second drive where they were getting 10 yards on a couple of carries, some really nice creases. They definitely found something at halftime that they liked, and they went to it, and it was working really well. So I have to say they ran the ball probably better than I thought they would coming into the game.
I agree.
So they ended up with, let's see, where was it? 153 yards, so 3.7 per carry. The way it's been going, that's a step up. So I guess you'd say it's progress.
We'll finish up with some offensive play calling and the passing game here. Nebraska had 6 plays that went for negative yards on Saturday in its passing game. They went to the screen well over and over. It did not work, including at the end of the game with inexplicably I don't understand how you're calling those screenplays back to back, and you're just giving yards away. Did Matt Rule give any indication that he understood what Nebraska was trying to do with its offensive play calling, in particular with the screen game?
I have to go back and listen to that quote he gave. He was asked about the screen game, and I don't want to misrepresent it because it's not coming to my mind exactly what he said. But I'm with you on the last series. Like, I wanted to see him attack downfield there.
Right.
Like, I feel like if nothing else, you've got some big receivers. You know, maybe you can draw a flag. There's been some of that. There'd been a lot of contact. It was obviously an emotionally charged ending, the way everything was unfolding. And so I think there was an opportunity to try to probably stretch the field on the early downs. I don't know what they had planned before the false start. That's sort of where things you kind of had that bad feeling in your stomach right away when they got that 5-yard penalty, because the penalties that just moved the ball to midfield. It's like, okay, maybe this is the moment. And then there's that sort of, it's unfortunately been a part of Husker experiences in these late games where they have that false start or something like that, where it's like, okay, now they're behind the sticks. And yeah, I didn't love the screen calls there. And this continues to be a team that with the perimeter blocking on that just doesn't do it well. Like, they just guys keep getting lit up for 2-yard losses or nothing. You know, there was maybe a play or two that worked with that, but the losses far outweighed those.
Yeah. Anything else you want to get to in the passing game? Obviously, Dylan Raiola finished with an interception. He missed on a couple throws that were there. His placement of the ball is just not. It's not what he wants. It's not where he wants it. They're not able to go downfield, Brian. I mean, I'll probably write something on this, but just looking at the month of October, like 37% of their throws that they completed went for 4 yards or less. That's not very good. And so the passing offense continues to be very much a work in progress, which is wild to me because a month ago I wouldn't have said that. And yet the entire month of October, it proved to be really hard for Nebraska to move the ball downfield with their passing attack. And it was a rough month for Dylan Raiola. There's no question about it.
Yeah, there's some growing pains going on. And the one that's going to haunt, I think, is Banks, you know, down here with third quarter. He had Banks he could have walked in.
Ran a beautiful pick play. It was a good play design. It was executed, and he didn't get it.
Yeah, would have been about a 30-yard touchdown. And that was that third quarter I talked about earlier, where it's like Nebraska had more opportunities than Ohio State. Really, in this game, they did. Like the Huskers will look at it and see far more chances they had where they could have put points on the board than Ohio State sort of maximized, frankly, what they could have gotten points-wise from this game for how they were moving the football. Nebraska is going to see that play they missed to Banks. They're going to see the play, the 4th and goal on the 2, where I think there was maybe some confusion. And I don't know if you think about a timeout there, but it was another terrible spot because Ja'Cory Barney had fought his way, I think, to about the 1. And maybe that changes it. They brought in Ty Robinson, actually, as a blocker with Micah Mazuka. And I don't know if Dowdell made a mistake leaving his feet there. If he would have moved to his left, someone I think thought he could have scored that way. So maybe he left his feet too early. But that's a play where maybe you score if the ball's at the 1 and not the 2. And so that's why I know people don't like when you get all in, get after the officials and stuff like that. But this is both coaches are going to send in, I think, a lot of plays from this game. And it's got to be better than that. You can't have that sequence at the end of the first half, Schaefer, where Emmett Johnson's a full yard ahead of the marker.
It's inexplicable.
That's incredible.
And I don't understand. You have officials on the field. You have officials whose job it is to call in if things need to be reviewed. That can't be missed. It's inexcusable for that to be missed.
So, I mean, we stop games all the time. Someone get in their ear and say, you're a yard and a half off here, dude. And not only that, it was about a 30-second, time difference for Nebraska because they thought they had the first down. They didn't. You could have said maybe Nebraska could have had more urgency even in that situation, but I kind of get it because you're thinking like we got the first down and then you're like, what? So it was just a bad game, I thought, by the Stripes. And obviously the crowd was mad at them at the end of the game, but I'd have to say Nebraska probably got the worst end of things if you totaled them all up throughout the game.
Yeah, and that's not even counting some of the judgment calls they did receive or didn't receive throughout the contest as well. But ultimately, Nebraska goes down, 4-point loss to Ohio State. A strong performance. But I think, Brian, the takeaway for both of us is this performance only really matters if you're able to build on it positively next week against UCLA at home. A game that I think the fan base is going to be ready for. I think, stupidly, if you want to look at a narrative thing, I think Nebraska fans are going to be excited to welcome Nebraska back to play on Saturday against UCLA. I think they certainly earned respect with how they went into Ohio State and played. People don't want moral victories. 2021 is full of the lifetime of moral victories.
Yeah.
It's time to win games. But I think the way Nebraska's defense showed up at least has people feeling better about what's ahead than certainly where they felt in between the two games.
That's a good way to frame it. What today did is I think it did bring the juice to that game next week. Yeah. And that's a
it's big gonna be a good crowd.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a good crowd.
And whereas a week ago, like if someone said, are they even going to get the 6 wins, or 7 is the ceiling? Now I think people, there's everything's going to be a fight, but I think people are like, okay, there's nobody of the 4. If they play with this effort today and you give that all of November, you can win any of those games. You can be in it. You can give USC all sorts of problems, with your defensive front if they get after it like they did today. So it did bring back some hope that I think sort of was momentarily quieted last week. So, yeah, like I said, though, you got to win next week to really make this the payoff for this.
All right, that's everything we got for you here with the postgame podcast with Husker247. We have a lot of postgame coverage, game balls, report cards. We've got conversation starters at the gun. I know BC's working on a column. It might already be up. Brunts is popping in with stuff. We got the 3-minute drill. There's a little bit of something for everyone. So get your fill of Nebraska, Ohio State, and we'll get you prepared for Nebraska, UCLA coming up next Saturday. So be sure to stop by Husker247.com. We appreciate you listening and watching us here with Husker247 content.